Thank you everyone for joining us today as we continue on the data journey with our second webinar in our E-QIP data literacy series entitled Unlock the Power of Data. I'm Eleni Tsoutias, and I am one of the co-leads of E-QIP. And before we get into it today, I'm grateful to welcome everyone with a land acknowledgement. As this forum is occurring in a virtual space, and participants are from across the province, I will acknowledge the land that I'm joining from. I am joining you today from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. This land is also home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I am grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, born here, to parents that immigrated from Greece, and would like to acknowledge all the peoples on this land, including those who came here as settlers or migrants, either in this generation or in generations past, and those who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as the result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. I would like to acknowledge that the disproportionate harms Indigenous peoples experience due to mental health challenges and substance use is a direct result of colonization, and that colonization and racism continue to influence social structures such as drug laws, the legal system, child welfare, and healthcare, including mental health and addiction services. And I encourage everyone to take some time to reflect on the colonial context of the land from which you are joining. We'll move to the next slide, which outlines our agenda for today's webinar. We're going to start with a brief overview of some of the key components of what was discussed in the first webinar of the series. Then continuing on our journey, we will focus on data quality, including some of the key concepts such as accuracy, reliability, and the comparability of data, in addition to the many uses of data in informing our approaches and decision-making with respect to clinical care, quality improvement, planning, and accountability. We will also be exploring data visualization to help us tell a story with our data and to help identify and address any limitations with our data. Lastly, we'll be hearing from Pine River Institute on their experience and lessons with respect to using the use of data to measure outcomes and inform clinical care. So E-QIP's data literacy series is intended to increase participants' understanding of data and data literacy generally, and advance your capacity to analyze and use data to improve both the planning and delivery of the mental health and addiction services you provide. We have two speakers planned for today's webinar. We have Dr. Chechak joining us today, who will be speaking to some of the key concepts that I mentioned earlier, and help to evaluate our data literacy skill, elevate, not evaluate, our data literacy skills. Dr. Chechak is the Director of Quality Improvement and Crisis Services at St. Leonard's Community Services in Brantford. He has extensive experience in social work and mental health and has contributed significantly to the field through research, teaching, and management roles. He has a strong focus on evidence-based implementation, science, and evaluation, driving clinical and operational excellence in mental health and addictions programs. We're grateful and excited to have Dr. Chechak presenting again for us today in our second webinar. We also have Dr. Laura Mills with us today, who will provide us with a firsthand account of her experiences in using data and evaluation to drive treatment outcomes through measures that are client-oriented. Dr. Mills conducts regular evaluation at Pine River Institute to measure both the immediate and sustained effectiveness of the organization's programs. She remains dedicated to broadening the impact of Pine River by contributing to literature regarding youth treatment. Big thank you to both Dr. Chechak and Dr. Mills for being here with us today. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our presenters, beginning with Dr. Chechak.
Thank you very much. Nice to see everyone again. And good afternoon if you're joining from my time zone. This is a webinar series, and so I wanted to begin with a brief overview of some of the key concepts from the first webinar. In the information age, it's essential that we understand how to navigate, interpret, and harness information. It's not just a skill, but a necessity. Think of data literacy as a critical skill and also a language to communicate with. As more people and organizations use data as a language to communicate with, understanding the basic concepts that are needed to interpret this language becomes increasingly important. Data informs local and regional planning, system efficiency. There's an increasing focus on progress and outcome monitoring or measurement-based care, which requires data to demonstrate progress in both implementation and health outcomes. And these approaches require that client information be collected at routine intervals to inform change. We're talking about building a culture, and in a culture that embraces quality improvement and accountability, data are used to monitor performance, track changes, and are transparently shared with boards of directors, funders, and the public. Data literacy skills allow us not only to create outputs, as we will show later, but also to understand outputs created by others. It helps us understand where data originated, how it was collected, how it's been analyzed, and what it can be used for. What you're looking at here is the definition of data literacy that I introduced in the first webinar. It was synthesized from a comprehensive report in 2015 by Dalhousie University. The authors define data literacy as the ability to collect, manage, evaluate, and apply data in a critical manner. This definition has 4 key aspects. 2 we covered previously, and the final 2 we'll look at today. So the first component was to collect data. What's important is that you're collecting information in a routine and organized manner. To get started with even the most ambitious plans for data analysis or data implementation, data must be findable and usable. Data that's not effectively managed from the point of collection becomes progressively more expensive and difficult to manage or locate when you need it later on. In webinar 1, we reviewed data sources that might already be available to you in your organization. This is data you can already use. There may not be a need to collect or begin collecting new data. We also discussed how indicator selection can be approached or what you might choose to measure. In our sector, accountability agreements can make some of these decisions for you about what you should already be tracking. There might be targets already outlined, reporting frequencies and due dates, and reporting standards that can be adopted for other sources of data. We discussed sector-specific indicators, which, especially when paired with or validated by another data source, could identify potential quality improvement opportunities. Examples of this include reducing readmission rates for recently discharged clients, improving scores captured by client experience tools, and reducing the wait time between a referral being made and a service being initiated. I mentioned reliability and validity, specifically in the context of quality improvement. We should aim for reliability in our measurement, but sometimes we have to allow for an ease of calculation to take precedence over this ability to make comparisons. So the goal is to ensure that the data we're collecting is not only accurate, but also consistently reliable over time. I presented the bullseye analogy, which illustrates those measurement concepts, where the center of the target was the concept you're trying to measure. If each time you attempt to measure the concept, you take a shot at the target, and if you hit it perfectly, you hit the center. If you don't, you're missing the center. But something that is consistently being tested over and over again could still be reliable but not valid. Something that's valid but not reliable means the average end result might align with the goal, but individually, you can't really rely on it consistently. Consistently hitting the bullseye is hitting the center of the target. And we discussed fundamental data collection practices and the importance of writing a data collection plan. The second component we covered was managing data. Managing data includes the essential skill of transforming, summarizing, and repurposing data for other purposes. This also includes the ability to create outputs and visualizations, and it also looks at the condition of your data. So is the data accurate, complete, up to date? Has it been consistently collected? Are you confident the data you are managing is Sorry, I need to go back to 11, please. Thank you. So within component 2, we looked at data quality practices, data information quality frameworks, and the 5 dimensions of data quality. To implement quality assurance effectively, organizations often turn to data quality frameworks. They provide a structured methodology and guidelines which serve as recommended starting points to determine where we should focus our efforts. They guide us in identifying critical dimensions of data quality, such as accuracy, completeness, consistency, timeliness, relevance, usability. By aligning these frameworks, organizations can address and enhance specific aspects of data that matter most to their specific needs. And the CII Information Quality Framework was one such example, which was shared as a reference in the presentation. So picking up where we left off with the third component of our definition. The third component is evaluating data. This is where we introduce the use of more technical skills. We're trying to draw insights from what's been collected and already summarized. And this is where the importance of a data quality culture starts to come into view. Data that have been collected and presented can easily be dismissed or shelved. Even the best quality data can be buried somewhere. An organization with a strong data culture won't allow this to happen. It will stress the importance of analyzing data and then using it, drawing inferences from it, and actively applying the findings within a quality improvement framework. The third competency aligns with the middle steps in a data analysis and interpretation process. So at this stage, you want to prepare and check your data. Considering the data quality dimensions that were reviewed previously, we might want to define key concepts, clean the data, especially if it's been collected or entered inconsistently. We come back to an important guiding question. What level of quality do you need or can you accept for your purposes? Then it's time to perform your analysis. So you've likely considered what types of programs or software that might be needed for this, who shows that the methods you're using are producing usable results. You can also identify unexpected findings in real time by keeping a close eye on the analysis as you go and not simply trusting the end result of the output. So there's some other ways you can assess the quality of your data in addition to just keeping an eye on it. The growth of administrative data repositories has spurred the development and application of data quality frameworks to ensure that analyses based on data can be used to draw meaningful conclusions. Many of these repositories provide data quality reports, or you can adopt or build a data quality report or checklist. The Manitoba Centre for Health Policy developed one such framework for this purpose. So what you're seeing on the screen here is how the data quality dimensions that we've covered map onto subcomponents that are evaluated for the purpose of assessing data quality. The bottom part of the diagram also illustrates some computer macros that were produced by this organization to assess valid, invalid, missing, and outlier data. Validation scores can also be customized based on rules that the user develops and enters. And it also scans for repeated observation with the same value over time, indicating there was no change. If there was no change, that could be a data quality error, or it could be an accurate reflection. But in that case, were you expecting some change that didn't occur? And if so, why didn't it occur? These are some examples of data quality reports from EMHware, which is the client management software that we use at my organization, as well as Catalyst, which would be well known in the addiction sector. So internally, the quality improvement team uses these routinely to identify and correct data quality errors. And then I also wanted to share with you an example of a data quality report that was created by our internal network administrator for the mobile crisis response program. So what this report does is it scans the client records and identifies the most common errors that occur, which are usually data entry errors related to missing fields or incorrect timestamps. And not everything can be built into a report. Data quality checklists are a viable alternative, especially if your data system doesn't allow it or doesn't support these types of custom reports. So this is an example developed by the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which is a United States Department of Energy research facility. But there's some general guidelines here that can be applied to many different data sets. And this is an example created by the Institute of Educational Sciences, which is the statistics, research, and evaluation arm of the United States Department of Education. I understand we have a question.
Yes, thank you, Derek. We just wanted to check in with the participants to understand if there was a need out there for a data quality checklist similar to the ones that Derek has presented. And so we're going to launch a poll. And if you could just take a moment and answer the question for us, that will help us understand whether there's a gap to be filled out there from E-QIP side. So if Olivia, launch the poll for us.
It's just giving me trouble here. Eleni, do you think you can launch it?
No. Apologies. Maybe my suggestion is we skip it, and if anything, we can come back to it.
Okay, so keep that in mind.
Oh, I lied.
All right.
It's
Keep it
there.
in mind now.
Thanks, Derek. Please, yes, go ahead. And thank you, Laura, for introducing the poll. I was having some technical difficulties on my end. We'll just give it a moment to give participants an opportunity to respond. We still have some responses coming in, which is great. Thank you, everyone. Okay, I think we're good to end the poll and share the results. Oh, so we do see a large degree of our participants today agreeing that it would be useful, a data quality checklists, and understandably some thinking there may be value in it. So that's great. We'll move us to the next slide, Derek, so you can continue.
Yeah, thanks for that poll. And there's variation in the data quality checklist too. And I know it was just a quick snapshot of those. The first one was more focused on file structure and elements of data integrity. The second one mapped more closely onto the dimensions of data quality. So certainly depends on what you're looking for, but all good considerations within the broad topic of being able to manage data effectively. So in the fourth component of the data literacy definition, you've now collected your data, you've developed a data management plan, we've checked the accuracy. We now want to apply the data in a critical manner. This requires us to examine the data that's been presented with a healthy skepticism. We want to move beyond any gut feelings or instincts about what we would expect the data to say. And this is a key skill towards developing a data-driven decision-making culture or framework, both individually and for organizations. And it starts to get at the so what question. How will we use this information? The data is of such high quality, we now have to have a use for it. So applying data for specific purposes is a great way to build critical thinking skills around this as well. In the data analysis process, we're ready to summarize and then disseminate our findings. So data visualization can occur at different steps of the data journey, depending on what you're using it for. While data can be presented in a way that helps tell a story after you've completed your analysis, it can also be used to check data quality. Data visualization is the graphic representation of information. We use charts, graphs, and maps to make trends and patterns and illustrate things that might be hidden in a large data set. It also makes data much easier to understand and comprehend. There's three common ways of presenting data. The first option is text, where you simply create a written summary of the numbers and figures from your data. Not everything needs a visualization, but you may opt to report your data in a table format, which provides the same information, but doesn't require reading through a lot of text. And then we might present information visually, which can be incredibly effective as we absorb and process this type of information faster than any other. So the left is a straightforward pie chart. This is the land area of Canada divided amongst provinces and territories. Pie charts effectively show percentages of a whole or proportions, but you have to be cautious when using a pie chart with many categories, especially when the categories are small, kind of like this one. You'll probably want to use a table in these cases. And then a bar chart, that might be better when you're comparing different groups. This is a bar chart as an example showing the prevalence of different mental health disorders based on some data from the United Kingdom. The chart clearly shows that anxiety and depressive disorders are the most prevalent, but you have to be careful looking at the scale. The scale on this one goes from 0 to about 5.5%. If you just looked at the length of the bars, you might think this was 80 or even 90%. So in addition to displaying data, we can use this as a simple way of checking for errors. For example, if the pie chart on the left was suddenly population, we know that wouldn't make sense unless there's been big changes in the territories since I've started this webinar. Similarly, the bar chart might reflect something that's miscoded, especially if the data doesn't support what you already know about your population. So it might actually be wrong. But on the other hand, if the data are correct, this should be looked at from a programming perspective. Are you offering programming that best aligns with what the data show are the most prevalent presenting problems? And then finally, infographics or dashboards. These are collections of images, charts, and text that give an easily understandable overview of a topic. They communicate information quickly and clearly by combining data and visualization. This is an example of a template that we use internally for progress and outcome monitoring in one of our bed-based treatment programs. So this is a summary that's provided back to clients individually, showing their change over time. As a general practice, it's important to be aware of how privacy legislation impacts how you use or share data, especially in the context of what we're discussing today. This is a crucial understanding not only for our sector, but also how personal information is used by private sector organizations as well. If you're a health information, if you're a health service provider and the information you are planning to present or share uses health information, I want to highlight the importance of working with your privacy officer, who is a key resource for your organization. The legislation that governs health information clearly outlines when you can collect, use, or disclose information. And it also outlines scenarios where, excuse me, where it is implied that a client has provided consent with respect to using their information, or when consent must be obtained expressly. When we're talking about data that's used for quality improvement, oftentimes it will not be considered personal health information. And PHIPA does require using non-personal health information if other information will suffice. But this could still introduce a number of business considerations or concerns, specifically around issues of ownership or reputation. Could the information be used against an organization, even if it's worthwhile to share? Data sharing agreements or frameworks, especially among partners, can help alleviate some of these concerns, but organizations will want to look at this topic in the context of the specific information that is being shared or released. Now, one of the better and more relevant illustrations of applying the results of data literacy competency is measurement-based care. And on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Laura Mills, Research and Evaluation Director at Pine River Institute.
All right. Thanks, Eric. That was excellent. And I was taking notes too, because it's such a great, I think, connection between what we do and what you're talking about. And so I'm pleased that we got to partner up on this part of it. Okay, so I guess, first of all, I just wanted to make a little note about who and what Pine River is. We are a long-term live-in care facility in Ontario for teenagers who have addiction behaviors, as well as a host of other behavioral and mental health issues. We're probably the only facility I know of in North America that is a comprehensive program of 4 phases. So there's an outdoor leadership experiences, which is a couple months out in the woods, kind of just getting grounded, getting sober, recognizing there's a need for change in their life. Then they move to our campus, where they spend about a year working together in a therapeutic milieu, and their family is also doing family therapy work while they're there. We have a transition phase where some youths will transition on the campus, some will go to our transition house in Aurelia, and then we have aftercare, which is an outpatient approach to make sure that all the treatment gains we made in program are sustained, and we can launch this youth back as an adult into society. In terms of our therapeutic approach, we use an eclectic blend of evidence-based practice that spans CBT, DBT, satire family therapy, etc. It's very individuated, and really the therapeutic milieu is a part of that whole therapeutic approach. And I think the two things that really set us apart are the fact that we do really require families to be engaged with the therapeutic process and walk alongside their youth in terms of changing what's going to happen when the child goes back home. And the other thing that we do is that we've been dedicated to evaluation since we opened in 2006, which does make us unique in Ontario, sadly. And we've been doing program evaluation ever since, and we produce an annual evaluation report. Which seems not to be, here it is. Our annual evaluation report can be found on our website if you wanted to check it out. That QR code should work. But it just shows a little bit about the program and processes, like how many come in and how many graduate, etc. As well as all of the health outcomes that we have. We measure client health before, during, and after therapy. We use these to validate our treatment. I think that's really important to the program, but we also use it to foster evidence-informed and evaluation-informed treatment decisions at the individual level. Pretty important to us is that we validate our long length of stay or duration. It is a long and expensive program, and it's incumbent on us to show that duration and that investment in the child's life is worth it. And I'll show you that in a minute. So I thought I would give just an example of how we use it at the individual level. So one thing we measure during treatment is the capacity for empathy. We find that that's really lacking in youths who come in with sort of a failure to launch issue. They're very immature. They don't have that abstract capacity for empathy. And so we measure that during treatment. And we saw this one child, typically the youths come in and they go to the outdoor education, and then their capacity for empathy improves dramatically in the first half of the program and then sort of plateaus. And for this youth, it was sort of the opposite. It stayed pretty low for the first half of the program, and then it shot up and then it plateaued. And so it was a real lesson for us to understand that this particular youth needed more time to process the work of the program. And so she was ready to transition to our house in Aurelia, and the program manager there was that they then had the knowledge to know to be patient and let the time take its effect on that processing capacity. So it really does help us make decisions at that individual level. Okay, so to me, I think I wanted to note that this is a data quality presentation, and my focus really is on evaluation, but I wanted to just kind of point out that for me, data quality is really having the capacity to use data to tell the truth and to tell it clearly and to tell it in a way that can be used. And, you know, Derek said it earlier, it can be used in a way to inform change. And so I try to do that. I think for me, first and foremost, I try and tell the truth as cleanly as I can. And so I thought I would use this graph to explain like all of the truths that I have here. So I'll start with just explaining what the graph is. This is a mental health measure called the Achenbach system of empirically based measurement. I think it's the most widely used tool in the world to measure mental health and behavior. It's a standard, validated, reliable tool and can be used longitudinally to measure change over time. So the things here I show are that we have pre-PRI, so before PRI, 3 to 6 months after the program, and then 1 to 2 years after departure from the program. That's the bottom axis there. The scores are along the vertical axis, and basically it's there's a normed benchmark showing that red dotted line. That's a healthy benchmark. So any scores under 64 are considered in the healthy range. Scores over that are considered clinically problematic. They do go down because this is a symptom scale. So you're measuring symptom distress here. So you want to see them go down. So the other things I wanted to note is that there's an N equals 75 here. That means 75 people are contributing data at these 3 time points. And a little leftover from academia is that I will not use this kind of line graph unless it's all the same people at all 3 time points. That is what a line graph is for. It's to demonstrate change. Bar graphs can show if there were different people pre-PRI to post-PRI at any time point. So line graphs should be matched scores. And then the 2 lines are partial completers and people who completed the program fully. So for us, as I said earlier, we do want to validate our long treatment. It's long, it's intensive, it's really hard, and we want to show that it's really worth it. And so what this shows is that the greenish teal line here, youths who complete the program, they decrease their scores and those are sustained over time. And the yellow, they don't change as much, although they do continue to sort of improve as time goes on. But the fundamental issue here is that kids who come to PRI get better and stay better, particularly if they complete the program. And so the only other thing I wanted to mention is that there's one thing here that says caregiver report. We get the best response rate from caregivers, and so I use that because it's just more robust to have a bigger data set. And I've always measured against the youth report to see that they're fairly well aligned, and they are. So I'm confident that what I'm showing is really health changes over time. I just always want to say that this is a parent or caregiver report. It's not a youth self-report. So the other things I kind of, this is the same slide. The other thing I work into it is explaining the graph as well as I can in as few words as possible in our annual report about what the scale is, what the healthy benchmark is, and then what this says, what it says. So I tried to underline here for you like these little points of truth that I wanted to make sure were very open to the public and anybody who reads this document. And then for the whole statistical significance of change part, I usually use that as a note, as a footnote, because nobody really likes to read all that jargon. And so that is all my statistical notation is footnotes in an actual document. And so if you're a super nerd, you would know what this is significant with a large effect size, and this eta squared just means that the magnitude of change is big. So we're really proud of this at Pine River. We are doing what we say we're going to do, and our length of stay is validated. And so this is just the other half of that survey. This is the rule breaking. I believe they call it externalizing disorders. Again, it's caregiver report. I'm not going to explain the whole thing. We get to show that kids get better and stay better, particularly if they complete the program. And another thing I do like to bring in to supplement the quantitative data are some testimonials from youth themselves. Because I use caregiver report for my quantitative data, I always want to bring the youth voice to our report. I think that's the fairest way I can do it is to actually quote what they say in some of their surveys. So I do that through the report. Okay. So Derek was mentioning the, having reliable, valid instruments is ideal. And so I agree, but there are some things that you want to measure that just don't make sense to have like a valid test. So when was the last time, if ever, you visited a hospital? Like there's no real, survey out there. It's just a question. So this is an example of that. And here you will see that, again, there are different ends, meaning the number of responses at each time point. So here, pre-PRI for hospital visits for substance use specifically, 241 applying caregivers contributed data, and they said that a quarter of their kids were in for mental health reasons and 20% were in for substance use reasons in the past 3 months. So this is a very, ER visit prone group of families that we have. And then post-PRI, I again separate it by completers and partial completers. You will see our response rate is higher among completers than non-completers. We do have more completers than non-completers, but our response rate is better among completers. And you can see that hospital visits in the 3 months before doing the survey were less frequent for those who completed the program than for those who didn't. But the one thing I wanted to point out here is that it's nice to have this graph, and it's neat to see, substance use hospitalizations decreased to next to nothing for those who finished Pine River. That's excellent. But there are little caveats with every question we ask. And so for this one, I wanted to point out that sometimes little notes under a graph are really important. So for example, it's hard for a parent to respond to a question about substance use hospitalization. If a kid overdosed, that might really be a mental health issue, but they're coming, are they coming in for the substance overdose or for the mental health issue? And so sometimes they might double click and say it was mental health, and then they were also hospitalized for substance use. And there's no way for us to really parse that out. It just is an artifact of the question that we have to live with, but I always want to be pretty transparent about the fact that we can't really know, like, if this number is 100% accurate. On Derek's bullseye, it would be like maybe first ring, I would say, away from the bullseye. And so I have a question about missing data. So it's a great question. Clinical data have tons of missingness. And I wish every parent and every kid would answer every survey every time. And it's just not going to happen. And so what I have done over the 15 years I've been doing this, I do all kinds of like nerdy checks. So I'll kind of look to see if if response rate impacts the scores, like if they responded to 3 surveys and some responded to 8, well, is that response rate, does it impact the scores that I see? I'll also always try and triangulate responses. So if I have an indicator that is, say, depression, does the parent score match the other parent score or the third parent score? And does it match the kid score? And does it align with what the clinician is saying? So I use checks to kind of make sure, or try and make sure, what I'm presenting is as close to the truth as possible. We in the clinical realm are never going to have data without missingness. That belongs in the universities where they have perfect studies and perfect clients that only have one issue, and they do really nice experimental studies there. Okay. So then I was impressed when Derek said something about a data collection plan. And I never had one. We always kind of was, we're working in the Wild West when it comes to evaluation at the program level because there wasn't a lot of guidance. And we had a question that existed before I came along, and it said, in the past 3 months, has your child visited a hospital for substance use reasons? We just saw the results in the last slide. And the response options were yes, no, and don't know. And so this was great. And all along I knew this is good, but it doesn't tell us how, like, if the kid had been in a hospital 6 months ago for substance use reasons. But at 40 kids a year in the past, I was really hesitant to change a question because I knew it would mean I'd encounter a loss of the data I already had. So when the GAIN system kind of was semi-mandated around the province, I knew I had to change this question because the questions were phrased differently. There were different response options, and no way was I going to ask somebody to answer the same question twice. And so the new question was, when was the last time, if ever, hospitalization for substance use? And they had these other response options. So what happened in my actual data is that if a parent said no, so then I ported all my old surveys into the new question, but I lost a lot. I just had missing data because in the old question, if they said no, hadn't been to a hospital in the past 3 months, I couldn't know if anything beyond this 2 to 3 months ago response option in the new question. So I would have to leave it blank. And so I lost probably half or maybe more of my hospitalization data and other data that was frequency like that. So it was a hard thing to think about before the mandate or semi-mandate came down. And when it came down, it made it sort of, okay, it's time to get a better question anyway, and we just have to eat it. And at 40 people a year, it was really hard to lose that data because I felt like I was using some robustness in my data. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to chat about, this is going to start to look familiar to you. We measure family functioning. We really do a lot of work with our families. In fact, our parents go to weekly family sessions. They do individual work. They come to learning workshops. They go on like this sort of intensive retreat. They're very involved. We figure if the kid goes back to the same container they were in before the program, there's not going to be a lot of good outcomes there. So we need to change that container. And so we measure family functioning with the McMaster Family Functioning Device. We just use the general functioning subscale that I'm showing here, which is a symptom score. So higher scores mean higher dysfunction, and we want to see them go down. And here, the North America Healthy is at 2. And so we would like to see scores go under that 2. Again, this is a line graph, so we know this is matched over time from 87 moms on the my left. And what it shows is that for completers, they start the program at just under 2.5. And then post-program, the family functioning goes into the healthy range and is sustained over time. There's less change for those who partially complete the program, and that less change is sustained over time. So again, more validation for program completion. This is not new. All over the literature, you will see that program completion is a predictor of better outcomes. So we felt it's incumbent on us, though, to show it for our program. And then the other side of this is I did bring in youth self-report here to show the kind of alignment here. There are only 26 youths in this one group that have all 3 surveys done, but 26 is okay across 3 time points. It's not great, but it's okay. It's good enough to show it publicly. And so what you see here is a little different result here. You see the sustained gains are not as quite as well experienced by youths as they are by the moms. And so, I mean, for me, I actually love showing things like this. It makes me feel like things are transparent, makes it feel like we got stuff to work on. We can look at our aftercare game, etc. I do like to point out that, or point out for you for data quality, the demonstration of the data, I have the scales are the same. That red line is going across at the right point, so you can look at these as a comparison. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that this particular scale, I said moms in it. These are caregivers who identify as mom of the youth, and that's why the word moms is here. And I wanted to just let you know, like, we recognize that the nuclear family is not the way of Ontario or Canada or probably the world at this point, although a lot of surveys are developed and administered as though nuclear families are still the norm. So we have changed. We have changed our language on our questions. So, and I'll get to that in a second, but I thought I would tell you a story about a parent who called me about her youth who was heading up to the wilderness. And she's an academic, so she kind of spoke the language of survey questions and etc. And she said in her family, they are 2 moms of with an interracial adoption family. And so this kid who already was stressed and in a strange van with strange people was given a survey. And one of the first questions he had to answer was, please rate your mom on this and your dad on this. And it really, like, I felt like so terrible because I was the first point of stress for this kid who was already probably so stressed out. And I thought, like, this has to change. I have to change it. It's going to mean more work for us. So for anywhere where we were using nuclear family oriented language or binary gender language, we changed all of our surveys. Where we were using standardized tools like the Achenbach system of empirically based measurement, I contacted the survey developers to understand that if we change the language, can we still consider it reliable and valid? And they said, yes, there's a study that supported that. So I felt like this was such a good step forward for us, even though when it came down to it, it's going to mean a little bit of a data quality issue. But in my opinion, making sure that we respect the client and the family and making sure their voice is heard trumps data quality. So the old way we answered this question about, this is an attachment style. I think probably everybody here knows about, like, you know, insecure attachment, secure attachment. This is the attachment style questionnaire. And the way we used to ask it is, please answer the following questions about your mother or mother-like figure, and then the same questions about your father or father-like figure. And it was a real struggle for us to figure out, well, how can we ask this in a way that is respectful, but also in a way we're not going to have to change it 2 years from now. That was a real concern for me. And so what we came up with was this. So we actually brought in fields into the survey. It says the first name of one of my main caregivers is blank, who is my, and we give an example. And so in this way, it's going to mean for us and the department, we're going to have more work. We're going to have manual work, which usually means there's more propensity for error, which is really scary. But I think being respectful to the changing dynamics of what family look like is more important. Okay, and then one last bit about second last bit about transparency and being honest with the data and how the data are presented. One of the questions I ask is about caregiver missed work. It used to be called parent missed work. We've changed that, but all of our old data is still moms and dad missed work. So that's why in the survey, in the chart itself, we have moms and dads, and soon we'll have a different view of this. So what we see here is the number of moms and dads who answered the survey before Pine River. So 250 moms, 216 dads answered a question about how much work have you missed in the 3 months before doing this survey. So we have data from over 200 of each mom and dad. And then post-program, you can see the number of moms and dads who completed the program and only partially completed the program. So before coming to Pine River, moms on average missed about 16% of their work time, which I think is about 9 days in 3 months, which is almost a day a week, which is a lot. And dads were missing about half that. And then post-program, that reduces significantly, particularly for families who complete the program. But here, the notes are important also. So first of all, missed work may be conceptualized very differently since the pandemic. You might be working from home and not call it missed work if you have to jump out to an appointment to support your child. Also, in the notes that say, if you want to comment on this, go ahead. Some parents, they said 0, but then they said, I quit my job to support my family. And so really, out of the 60 days in working days of any 3 months, that should be missed 60, but they had put 0 because they weren't actually engaged in employment at the time. And so for me, the number of missed days is underestimated. But I would rather underestimate it than make it, than blow it up and make it look like they were missing 30% of their work time, and then we can show this huge difference. So for me, I just wanted to make a note that even if you make little notes at the end and you don't think anybody's going to read them, it gives me some peace of mind to know that I'm being as honest as I can and making sure everything is transparent. Okay. So then in terms of data display, I just wanted to note, so my last little personal story is, so I developed the evaluation report and I finish it and polish it and I think it looks great. And then we send it to a graphic designer who makes it look awesome. I could never do the work that they do. But in doing so, they make changes that might not be what you want if you have not specifically made instructions otherwise. So we did all this, and even though I went over it with a finish tooth comb, I didn't notice what had gone on here. So this, I'm displaying our treatment progression. So of course, we always want kids to complete the program because completers do better than non-completers. So we want to show what our completion rate is, and we do it, going back 5 years. So each color is a different year, starting 2018, going through 2022. The darkest teal is 2022. And so we can see what part of the program kids are departing in. So it looks like in 2022, we had a big, we had an early departure rate higher than normal in our outdoor leadership experience in the wilderness. We know why that is. It was like we understand why that happened, but it's good for us to see this at a high level to know that things aren't going in a way we don't expect them to go. And so this looks awesome. But when I was doing the slides for this presentation, I put this up there and then I realized it's actually like, I'm so embarrassed that it's in the public in our annual report, because really it only goes to 70%. And so it makes it look like our graduation, the completion rate is really high, but it should go up to 100 to show that we're, our completion rate is 50 to 60%. To me, that has way more integrity than a pretty looking picture. So my lesson learned is, first of all, it's good for me to have to do these presentations and notice little things like that so it can be top of mind for this year's report. But also it was actually a good and humble thing I thought to bring here and let you know, like, I'm learning this over and over for a decade and a half now. And then I thought I would, almost always when I do a presentation about evaluation or data, there are these people come up with questions about software, what measurement instrument should I use? And it always will come down to like, you need to engage with the whole process at an agency level and understand what's going to work best for you. I put on here what we use for our software. We use this, it's electronic health record management that links our outcome surveys to our clients. So for me, that was actually like, it's just a great tool and it scores our surveys for us, which is really helpful. And then in terms of tools, again, this is the clinical team and I are always sort of co-creating this. Right now, my goal this year is to measure less. I want to measure what matters and only what matters. So I want to get rid of any surveys that the clinical team think are really not going, they're not going to use them to inform their treatment. And so it takes engagement across the agency to understand the tools that are best for use. And then another question I get is, when can we start putting an evaluation report on our website? And I think the answer is like, when you can tell the honest story, that's when. And I think if you even have only 10 clients a year, as long as you're very transparent about the pitfalls that might be involved in only having 10 clients a year, you should be trying to demonstrate your impact. I used to whisper this and now I kind of scream it loudly, like there's no way we should expect clients and caregivers to trust us to take care of their youth and family unless we can demonstrate we're not going to hurt them. And in fact, they're probably going to get better. So to me, measurement should be fundamental to treatment programs. And the last question is like the cost of evaluation. It's super expensive. It takes a lot of work. It takes special skills. And, Derek was saying there's data collection, data management, data analysis, data application. Those could be 4 people full-time anywhere. And as long as those 4 people are really good at communicating with each other, that's great. I think it's worth it to find somebody who can do all 4, because then at least it's like a coherent picture, but it's expensive and the province is not going to pay for it. So it's a lot of work, but in our opinion, it's worth it. I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Laura. That was great. We've gone a slide too far. I'll take us back. We are going to now launch our second poll. We have a few questions. If folks can take a minute, I can just read them out if helpful. Hope everyone can see it. What health surveys or measures of health is your organization using? The first question. Second question, what data collection tools? Can everyone see the survey? Great. What data collection tools is your organization using to assess your clients' clinical conditions and service needs? Oh, there we go. Now I'm seeing some engagement. Thank you. Are those tools standardized or developed in-house? I know Laura spoke to that a bit and some of the challenges with that. Appreciate if everyone can take a moment to complete the poll. And when we're done the poll, we can move on to some of our Q&As. I know folks have been active in the Q&A chat, which is great. We appreciate all the questions. I do see responses trickling in. What do you guys think if we leave the poll open for a bit and transition to our Q&A at the same time? Does that work for folks? Great. So I just want to thank both Laura and Derek for presenting today and everyone for participating and joining us. Once we're done with the engagement poll, the second one, we will also be launching our evaluation poll. But like I said, we have some questions here that I think we can get started on. Laura, there are a few questions that I'm trying to combine, and they're all kind of related to understanding better what how you define caregiver in the work that Pine River does. So specifically, one of our participants is asking, does a caregiver need to be biologically related? And if not, can it be a friend or a significant other? Also, whether you take into account families that only have one care provider, a single parent household, for example, and how, if yes, how you would identify that in your results.
Okay, so the first part of the question is how we identify a caregiver. At this point, it's however the family would identify it. If we have older sister who's going to be the adult that walks alongside the youth and provides that adult, the caring adult after, I think that would be okay. It's more of a clinical issue than I would know about. We have a lot of grandparents that are the primary caregivers, aunts and uncles. And sometimes it's like a collection of relatives. If it's a guardian, that's fine. So it's really kind of wide open in terms of defining caregiver, which is one of the reasons we really had to change, because we had a rigid identification in the survey language, and now it's really open. I don't know if that might change over time to become somewhere in the middle, so that there's better data, but still like honoring the spectrum of family, of how a family is defined. So right now it's wide open from a data perspective. I can't really answer from a clinical perspective, like what if it's a 2-year a sibling who's 2 years older, do we call that caregiver? I don't know. And then the other question was about only one caregiver. So one of our sort of demographic questions that we ask that aren't part of our health surveys is this family structure, access, custody, all of those things. We need to know that from a clinical perspective anyway. So we measure that, and that can be sort of linked to all the outcome surveys if we need to. Does that answer the question?
It does. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. That's great. Laura Mills, Laura Daly Trottier. I think we can end the poll now and share the results before I take us through some additional questions. We see a range of responses here, some folks using both standardized and in-house tools, similar to your approach at Pine River. That's great. Okay, there's a question. I can't see Derek on my screen, but I know he's still here. Hi, Derek.
I'm still here. Hello there.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
So you have a curiosity from one of the participants that there was a point in which you mentioned data quality check for timestamps. And this individual saying that when he thinks of timestamps, perhaps inappropriately, just accepting this timestamp that's built into the software. Is Derek referring to some other field, those automatic data that I have never, other fields, and maybe automatic data that he would never consider a question? I'm
going to assume that was around the example I shared of the report that was built here. If your computer timestamp is right, your software timestamp is trustworthy. The report that I shared was around the mobile crisis response program. So that's a manual entry. Our staff have to enter the time they arrived on scene without getting into the whole program description. That's a police partnership, so it's dispatched through 911. So they have to mark different time points, arrival on scene, if the person is being apprehended under the Mental Health Act and being transported to hospital, then we have the departure time, we have the arrival time at hospital. And because those are manual entry, it's one of the most commonly skipped fields. So, and I did see some activity in the chat around the teleport to scene comment. That's what happens. It looks like if all those times are blank, or even if they were all filled out the same, if the person puts in the same time for all the fields, it looks like the entire interaction occurred instantaneously, when in reality it's usually I'd say minimum an hour, but then we have other fields as well where someone might be at the hospital with the client for a full shift. So I'm assuming that's what it was in reference to, and I didn't specify that that's a manual field.
Thanks, Dirk. That's very helpful. And thank you, Laura, for reminding me that we would really appreciate if folks could take a moment to complete the evaluation poll before I go back to some more Q&As we have for our presenters today. We appreciate all the feedback we receive at E-QIP, and we use this feedback to improve on our next offerings. So folks, Laura, I don't know if I need to be providing any more instruction on that.
No, I think that's great. Thank you very much, Eleni.
Of course. Okay, this next question is also, I had it here. Oh, we have a follow-up on the timestamps. Thanks, that makes sense. But it's good to mention that there are dead zones in huge parts of rural Ontario, and that's a really good point. We're not all dealing with the quick working technology.
Yeah, very true. Good point.
Thank you for that. Okay. So I do see a question for Laura. How do you deal with missing data? Is there a large number of youth who are missing scores at each of the data points?
So yes, the answer is yes, there's more missingness than I'm comfortable with. So our parent response rate is usually between 65 and 70% for all caregivers. For those who completed the program, we're upwards of 90%. So I mean, our caregivers are very engaged throughout and after the program. We're administering surveys for years after the program. So we measure before, during, after, and after means every year until the kid turns 25. So we have longitudinal data. And so we do the same, we try and contact the youth, but for parents, you know, that 60 to 70 or 90 for completers, that's one thing that we can be proud of and we can thank our parents for. But for youth, we're running at around a 37 to 40% response rate to me. So that's any one response post-treatment. I'm getting like only 40% of our kids. And I mean, I think I'd be more comfortable, and I was just chatting with one of my staff about what's the threshold for missing data.
Mm-hmm.
Some would say 80%, but even 60% would be ideal. So we're working on strategies for that. But as I said, I do try to connect the dots and make sure even if the data are missing, I can try and see if I'm telling the right story, or if it's caregiver data, I'll look to see if for those kids for whom I have data, are these aligned? Am I telling the story even though it's not the self-report? So I'm aiming for that. The one thing I'd like to say is that we're a little archaic, mostly because of my fear and ignorance about using social media for data collection and survey administration. I simply have not taken the time to understand all the HIPAA rules about using different technology other than phone and email. I don't know about all the security and the rules around that. And so I think if we upped our game in terms of broadening our reach or our methods of reach, I think we could probably do better by the youth self-report. It's really just been a matter of bandwidth for the department. So so that's one area I would love to really get more youth self-report for sure.
Yeah, I think your instinct that you could get a little bit higher response rate with some social media is probably right for any of us who have to deal regularly with youth. You know, getting them to do things they don't want to do is not easy. So I'm sure it's going to be a heavy lift, but I'm glad that you guys are working on that. Next, we have a question from Jennifer Zosky. Hi, Jen. This for both of you guys. Just a question more generally about data completeness. Many community mental health and addiction services start working with people without necessarily collecting all of their information. We know that some folks may be homeless, for example, or not well enough to share that information. The mental health and addictions PDS that Ontario Health is rolling out and OCAN have non-mandatory fields and or options to select unknown, for example. How would this, in your opinion, impact data quality and its use?
I think I can respond first. And hi, Jennifer. The data that we receive or we collect, to Laura's point about missingness, we fully understand that there's a group of clients that are not able to participate in our outcome monitoring. It's not embedded in treatment that way. It is something that's added on as part of a partnership that we're doing. So I find at the individual level, even if we can't have the outcome monitoring for every individual, it still gives a really useful illustration at the program level of how we're doing. And in many ways, that's kind of like any other representative survey that might be administered or intended to be a generalization of what everyone's experience is. I know it's not going to capture everyone's individual experience, but we still see it as worthwhile at the program level because it has illustrated for us areas of improvement that we wouldn't have known about because they're more clinical than related to client experience.
Yeah, and I think I echo Derek. I mean, I think trying to help trumps anything about data. I think it's incumbent on us to try and get data, but at the end of the day, if we think we can help a person, we got to help. The question reminded me recently, I was at a symposium, and Eleni, you were there also, and I really learned something from one of the participants who talked about the fear of survey questions, and that, you know, in some cultures, there's actually a lot of fear about answering questions and not knowing where it's going, who's going to get a hold of it, am I going to lose my license if I say I've been drinking while driving? You know, there's quite a bit of fear around, and you know, license is their livelihood, let's say. And so missing data would have been just the norm as opposed to an anomaly for this particular, I think it was like more of a geographic area. And definitely like a cultural population in that area. And so I was thinking like, yeah, like how, we're so used to the way that we've been doing things for so long. And so how can you really make sure that you're going to give this person the best care you can based on the information they give you without stressing them out by asking information?
That's quite the balance.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was a great answer from you both. We have another question here. Is there a resource, again, probably for both of you, is there a resource where we can see a selection of surveys that have been vetted that could suit our specific needs and measure what we do?
Go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, I mean, this was before Google Scholar, but there's two resources I have always found quite useful in my own career. One is actually a manual called Measures for Clinical Practice by Fisher and Corcoran. I think it's up to 6th edition now. There's about 600 instruments in there. Some are free to use, some you have, well, they're all in there because they're free, but some are free to use and licensed to use. Others you do have to get a license. But those are all validated instruments for just a variety of clinical topics for couples, families, and children, and individuals, of course. And the other is that there's a measures database at the Knowledge Institute for Child and Youth Mental Health and Addictions that I go there occasionally too when I'm looking for things. Those are my two that come to mind.
And I would say more internationally, there's an organization called ICHOM, ICHOM. Don't remember what it stands for, but it's really geared toward measurement-based care and trying to implement measurement-based care across the health, spectrum, from cancer to surgeries to mental health, etc. And so if it's a really easy site to use because you can go and look under mental health and they'll have like say the 4 surveys that measure depression. And if you look at the language of those, that they have, valid, reliable, standardized, normed, all of those things that they have really vetted through there. And so I think it's a good start to say, these are ones that this international committee have felt like these can be used across the board for, say, adolescent mental health or adolescent substance use. And so I think that's another good resource.
Thanks, Laura. Others agree. There's a question for you to please repeat the website you were referencing.
Okay, it's ICHOM. And Derek, do you know what that stands for? I could Google it, but it's international something, I imagine.
International Consortium of Health Outcome Measurement, I believe, but I'm not putting
And
a lot of
your
money on that.
options as well, Derek, and maybe someone on the team can
Oh,
help
sure.
by adding the links to the chat. That would be very helpful.
Yeah, I can post those in the chat. So this is
Oh, there you go, Laura. Thank you.
okay.
We do have one last question, a really good one, very timely with all of the new initiatives coming at us from Ontario Health, particularly the ones related to data. We did already mention the PDS, the provincial data set. Could obviously understandable concern among participants that they could invest resources in evaluation and then come have a situation where something will come down the pipe that doesn't align with where they invested their time and resources. So how can, in this sort of level of uncertainty or environment of uncertainty, how can we justify any investments if we might need to change it based on provincial mandates?
The investment is in the I'd say the underlying staff competency to do this work and to pivot based on tools. I wouldn't say it's a tool specific competency. I referenced the team that my organization has invested in, which is actually when I came here. So there's three of us in a small quality improvement team. We have internal work that's not, I would say, it's not misaligned with provincial priorities by any means, but it's not mandated. It's specific program level quality improvement, data quality work, things that I referenced in the presentation, like that's occurring on a regular basis. So I would say the investment is in that and in the skill set of individuals who can adopt different priorities as provincial priorities change.
Yeah, and so like 15 years ago when I started, I remember sitting around a table and there were these older people who had been around for a couple decades, and there was so much cynicism about the province is going to change. And I was sitting there going, these are fixable problems. We can do this. We just have to work together and be aligned, and we just have to get going and do it. And now I feel like I'm like that older person at the table who's cynical about anything ever happening at the provincial level. And so I think the answer for me is you have to do it for your clients, your families, your staff, and your stakeholders. Whatever comes down the pipe will come down the pipe. I mean, it won't come down anytime soon. So just do it, I guess is my.
Right. I guess the one benefit of the ministry in Ontario Health usually taking quite long is we have a lot of time to sort of prep for it. That's true. Well, I think we've got into all of our questions. Again, huge thanks to both Laura and Derek for presenting today, and for all of the participants to join us, and for all the team at E-QIP for helping with all of the logistics and the many behind the scenes continuous troubleshooting we need to do for these webinars. So thanks team, thanks everyone. And we're not done. We're going to Laura, who's going to tell us about some very important webinars that E-QIP is planning in the very near future.
Yes, so we don't have a registration link to share with you, but Web3 is coming up April the 4th, and we want you to save that date. We don't have a time yet, but we will be sharing that information with all of you as soon as we have that information together. We're just confirming and finalizing our speakers and content for that date. And then we have, of course, our virtual conference coming up on April 23rd. So please save that date. Abstracts we will be accepting if you are motivated to do so until end of day tomorrow. We have been receiving quite a large number of abstracts, so it's going to be great, a great conference based off of just those abstracts that we're receiving. So very excited about that information coming through. Governance and leadership training, E-QIP offers that. We are booking well into 2024. And if you're interested in engaging in that type of training for your board and your leadership, please reach out to the E-QIP team at quality@equip.ca, and we will be happy to talk to you about how we can customize this offering for your organization. And we're very excited to share with you that we now have our Foundations to QI Ideas e-course available in French. So if you have community partners or staff in your group of folks who would benefit or appreciate this free training in French language, please register through the link provided on the screen. And it is a self-directed curriculum based on the model for improvement, and it takes about 8 to 12 hours to complete. So we invite you to engage in that training in both French and English. So again, thank you all for attending. We have really appreciated, again, the engagement and enthusiasm for increasing data literacy and understanding how you can unlock that power of data in your own work. So we encourage you to attend in April, and we look forward to seeing you again.